Why and how to meditate from the original Theravada tradition. Now, why people meditate is a broad subject. You'll get as many different answers sometimes as you have people nearly. So, we're going to cover in this lesson why people meditate, who should and should not meditate, how to meditate, dealing with distractions and objections to meditation, benefits and lessons from meditation, and how to enhance your meditation journey. That final item will be the conclusion to the presentation. But first, a reflection. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That's a quote from Blaise Pascal, who was a famous theologian, French theologian from many, many moons ago. And if you stop and think about this statement, it really captures the essence of what we're trying to go at when we go about trying to meditate. How many problems would be averted if we could spend time in a room alone and just think? Most of our minds are like a feisty golden retriever that jumps up on guests as they enter a house. You think of that analogy, we either have a dog or we've been to a friend's house who has a dog where the dog just jumps up on you as soon as you go in. And there is this bombardment of activity going on. And so you jump up and you see the dog jump up and then they just jump on you and you're like, oh, here now, here now. Our minds are precisely that way. Social media, of course, has made this at least 5 times worse. It's made it as many times worse as you have items. So if you have a tablet, if you have a Chromebook, if you have a laptop, if you have a work laptop, you 4 or 5 times worse than it otherwise would be. All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. No distractions, no phone calls, no yelling across the house on agendas, no making to-do lists, just sitting quietly. That we're going to come back to as the ultimate aim. But why do people meditate? Well, again, you're going to get a lot of answers. To be calmer, to slow down, to be less stressed, to overcome mental issues or fixations. Are these legitimate issues? Of course, I've said before, the irony of people who read self-help books is that they themselves need help. And the more self-help books they read, the more lost they are, and the more help they need. So it becomes a cycle of being destructive. And we have to ask, is that the case here? When we meditate, are we meditating to be calmer? Well, that means we are instinctively going to become probably angrier in our search for calm. If we need to slow down, it's because we're fast. But the more we try to slow down, the more spent we become, and the more fiery we become, and the more searching we become, which makes us go faster. To be less stressed is, of course, the goal really for everybody. I mean, there are a few people, I suppose, who don't have enough stress, but they're very hard to find. To overcome mental issues, anxieties, neuroses, fixations, the list of which is growing every day because we have people like psychologists and psychiatrists who are quick to create more diagnoses. And all of these diagnoses create yet more fixations and yet more desires to consume medications, which, of course, the people who take will have to be on for life. So are these legitimate reasons? The answer would be no. Sit there and let that sink into your mind a little bit. The answer would be no. So what's the real goal of meditation? The real goal is clarity, to see reality as it really is. This is the real reason for why we should meditate. All other benefits, stress reduction and being calmer, all of those that we just covered are secondary. And it's because there is a difference between being high and having clarity. To see something as it really is a blessing, because that means you understand it. If you understand how to put together a bookcase by reading the instructions, there's no frills to the situation. It's just reading the instructions and realizing when I follow these with the parts in the box, I'm going to have a bookcase. Apply that to your food. Apply that to your pursuits of your career, the proper job title, the car, the one that you think your neighbors will admire you for buying. All of that goes away, liking and disliking, when you understand the difference between being high and clarity. There is a huge difference. So who should and should not meditate? And by the way, on each of these points we're going to go through, we're going to find that this, all of what is being said here is going to come out all the stronger. All who, of mature age and sound mind, seek to know the reality of the world around them. Sounds pretty encompassing, right? Minus those who struggle with psychosis, schizophrenia, or who otherwise rely on psychotropic medications. For these people, if one can be mindful, that is enough, and I'm going to explain a little bit more here. It is worth stating that meditation can be done while walking or even driving just by calling to mind an action. Now, this is object, or again, insight meditation, but it's a more meditation light. Here is what I recommend if you're hearing this and you're finding this video and you've been struggling with mental problems. If you can go through the day and do this, you have done well, and you really don't need anything else. If you go through the day and you're driving, you think to yourself, driving. Picture the word in your mind, picture what that means, the task of driving, which you know encompasses giving signals, putting on the brake, if you have a standard, putting it back, putting the clutch in and putting it back in first gear and second gear and on and on. You might already know that. Of course you know that. You know how to drive and that you've been driving. But by focusing on the term driving, you're compartmentalizing the focus and all the tasks that driving entails. And by doing so, you become mindful of all the things you're not supposed to be doing. Getting angry, hurrying, stressing. So basically, this makes you more aware. It's like the bouncer in the bar looking at the guy at the end of the bar who's had a little bit too much alcohol and is about to be asked to leave because he's starting to behave improperly. Just seeing that bouncer look over will probably make him want to quiet down or else go, or watch himself, because he's in a situation where people are watching and he knows it. We call this mindfulness meditation, insight meditation, or walking meditation. So again, you don't have to be sitting in a pose, and we're going to cover this in a minute. So if you cannot meditate, if you have some mental struggle or issue, don't worry about it. Just call to be mindful of the task at hand, and this can be cooking, this can be making the bed, it doesn't really matter. The idea is to call together the task and to be mindful of exactly what it is you are doing. If you're doing multiple tasks, you can do that too. So we're going to come back to this. We're going to unpack it a little bit more. So that gives you an idea of who should and should not meditate. The reason I say this is that those who struggle with schizophrenia, those who struggle with mental issues can have them aggravated by becoming susceptible to awareness, and it can play games with their head. If that's not you, if you don't struggle with schizophrenia, you don't struggle with any sort of psychosis, then you don't need to worry. You can proceed on. Now we get into how to meditate. Sit in any comfortable position. To avoid getting too relaxed or falling asleep, be reclined or seated. It is not recommended that you be lying in your bed, because meditation and sleep tend to be first cousins. And the idea here is not sleep. The idea here is to be conscious and to be mindful. A lot of people talk about meditating when they sleep. That's not how it works. Meditating is a conscious act. Sit in any comfortable position. It doesn't have to be cross-legged or what they used to call Indian style. It doesn't have to have any sort of posturing or anything like that. All of that is superficial. Number 2, focus on your stomach and abdomen. Follow and breathe as your midsection rises and falls. We're going to focus on the midsection because it's the easiest thing for people of all physical conditions to note. We do this by mentally noting rising and falling. Stretch out each mental pronunciation for as long as it takes to complete the breath. So it should sound like this: rising, falling. And you do that for the stroke of the breath. Depending on your breath, and you want to follow the breath, it will have a different tempo. Rising, falling, rising, falling. You're not going to call this out loud, and you're not going to say a particular mantra or a phrase that catches an idea or reflects a truth of a moment. You're just going to say that to describe truthfully the act that you're doing. If you're breathing in, you are saying rising. If you're breathing out, you're saying falling, because your abdomen, even if only a little, moves in and out or up and down. So you say rising and falling. The noted phrases, again, are called mantras, and they don't have any magical power. They just are reflections of truths at a moment in time. When you're breathing in, you're rising. When you're breathing out, it's falling. Follow the breath in its relaxed state. Do not force it. Do not start breathing in and out and saying you have to hold for 4 seconds or 5 seconds. You don't have to do any of that. That defeats the point of what you're doing almost. So in the theater of your mind, feeling your breathing in and out, imagining the rising and falling of your abdomen from the breath is what you want. It should be as if nothing else exists or is outside of the rising and falling that you are experiencing as you meditate. You're going to project your will to this task until the timer goes off. If you do need to adjust your position, you just say adjusting, because that's the mantra that now reflects the truth of what you're doing. You say adjusting, and then you continue onward. So you're going to say rising, falling in your mind. Don't say it out loud. And if you need to move, if you need to adjust, if you need to twitch your neck, you just note the adjustment and you move on. This should not be stressful. Now, of course, by now you're going to jump up with objections. You're going to jump up with things that concern distractions. We're going to talk about the distractions. The distractions fall into 2 categories: peripheral and invasive. So the lighter distractions are peripheral distractions, and they might sometimes be called spectator thoughts. These are the things that are in the spots in and around your field of vision of your mind. So in other words, you're sitting there saying rising, falling, and in the midst of that, you see your HR director at work. You think of the fact that your kid's friend is not a good influence on your son or daughter. You're thinking about that grocery list those groceries you need to go pick up later in the day. You think of bizarre other notions that are you-ward, that involve your life and your ego. That's okay. Nobody's saying you have to force them out. That's the big misconception with meditation, is people think they have to have this yogi-like clarity to be able to block all thoughts out. That's usually a myth, but with people who meditate more frequently, it does get easier. More on that in a minute. The heavier invasive thoughts are altogether disruptive and will destroy your awareness completely. So for instance, if I'm meditating and I'm inundated with a very powerful thought that distracts me, it makes me lose focus on the breath, rising and falling. That's a disruptive or invasive thought, and in that case, I say distracted, and then on the next full breath, I say rising, falling, and I start again with resumed focus. So for the peripheral or light distractions, you ignore it and you move on. If you do lose focus on the breath, it's a serious distraction, you say distracted. Do not stop until the timer goes off, and we're going to set a timer. If you have one on your smartphone, set it for 5 minutes, 2 minutes to start, and then do another one. If you feel confident in it, do another one for 5, and then move to 10, and stay at that for a while for the next several weeks. If you are already experienced with meditation, you can go a little further, but for many who are not, just go for 2 minutes, then go to 5 minutes. And you will find that the time goes by very quickly, and you are sustaining more concentration than you think. If you are distracted by a thought, again, it's not the end of the world. It will happen many times, and sometimes it'll completely derail you a whole bunch of times in a session. The idea is not to keep score or to do different things, but to stay focused. Distractions are a part of life. You should be able to meditate right next to a jackhammer. It should not bother you at all. Does that surprise you? So let's talk about objections to meditation. Some people will be surprised that this isn't about harps or sounds of running water or something like that, or birds chirping in the background. The reason this isn't about that is because that is superficial, and that's what you're trying to get away from. You have enough of that in life. If you want, you can listen to motivational tapes and pleasant sounds. They're all over YouTube. They're all over the internet. You can buy little apps and download programs of relaxing music. That's not meditation. You don't have to, quote, clear the mind or, quote, go deeper. Those are things that people associate with meditation. They say, you've got to go deeper. Well, that misunderstands the purpose of meditation. Meditation involves the wisdom to see the world the way it really is, remember? So when you see the world as it really is, that means just accepting the way things are. They don't have to be pretty. They don't have to be handsome. They don't have to be glorious. They just are. Again, much the same way eating or drinking or walking, they're just acts. They don't involve anything as far as liking and disliking, which are hurtful to the meditation practice. Just because you, quote, don't like to slow down or don't like to be bored doesn't mean you should not meditate. In fact, the less you think you need meditation, the more you probably do. Meaning your mind is going too fast. You are lost in a world where you cannot fully appreciate the details because your clarity is low, your preoccupation is high. Even if you feel you, quote, aren't getting any results, know that you are. Much the same way that by not binging, even if you're not eating healthy, you're still doing better than if you were going out and eating. Because by not eating, that itself is a win. Think about that for a minute. It's the fact that you are aware of your golden retriever feisty mind and you're slowing it down. That's the win. Because you could be doing anything else except meditating. So let's talk a little bit about the trap of consciousness. Thinking without boundaries leads to, and I'm using a Saturday Night Live phrase here, real hot mic issues. If you don't recall the Altadena Middle School Saturday Night Live, the little picture I have here, then you may not be culturally familiar with it, and that's okay. But it's really funny. They say, "Oh, it's a real hot mic," when the feedback from the microphone. But that's how real feedback is in your mind. You start thinking, and then you start thinking about thinking. This is the trap of the West, and this is why Western and Eastern philosophy go different routes to explain the world. If you've ever thought about how God doesn't have a creator and yet exists, then you run into this problem because you say, who created God? So it's a mic issue. It's a hot mic issue. It's a, where does this goes on forever? It's an infinite regress. A chronic feedback loop leads to an infinite regress, which means we have been trapped. So in other words, you didn't take the message that you should have gotten the first time around. It's like a calculator where you get that error message and you get a big, long, crazy, infinite breakdown of numbers. So let's begin. Go ahead and pause the video right here and set your phone so that you're not thinking about the time for 2 minutes, and then begin. Get comfortable and go into insight meditation. Rising, falling. Pause and come back. Okay, how did that go? Now let's do it one more time. Let's do 5 minutes. Pause, and then when done, come back and we can discuss. So what are the benefits of meditation? How do you think you did? Do you think that that's something that is, quote, for you? Or is it something you felt totally weird and out of connection with? If the latter describes you, you are not alone. Most people feel like this is pointless, that it's awkward, that it's redundant, that you don't need it, that it's silly. But that's exactly why you need it, because you don't understand how fast you are going. If you're even interested in this subject, it says something positive about you. But if you don't quite, you need to give it a few more times, and you will start to see how post-meditation your actions change. You become aware of the passage of time in a more appreciable way. You learn to slow down and put a buffer between yourself and your actions and reactions, which is another huge thing we'll talk about when we talk about self-control in another presentation. You are aware of your levels of anger, lust, greed, delusion, and aversion. Those are the big mother sins, if you will. The states of mind that subvert your thinking. You are aware of how much time you wasted in the past pursuing unwholesome things. Unwholesome things being lusts and things that come to nothing, non-spiritual pursuits. Finally, you will be more honest about your intentions and more aware of unresolved issues of the past. And meditation not only carries the wisdom of the temporary nature of the universe, the rising and falling, but it shows the fact that we're often not honest in our intentions. Much the same way we go to work, we say we're going to work, we're driving, but we're not really driving. We're sitting there fretting about the fact that we don't like our boss, or we don't like our coworkers, or we're stressed out about having to plan a party coming up. But this is the next and final slide here, or next to last slide. But the ultimate lesson is the same as that of passing clouds, that all things are temporary, changing, and impermanent, and that nothing beyond the mind can be relied upon or used as a crutch. Nothing around you is permanent, and you can see the beautiful little poodle-shaped cloud there that so beautifully stands out as an example of nature's artwork. Well, guess what? You are nature's, the divine's artwork. You reflect a moment in time, the likes of which there will never be again. And yet you don't appreciate that. You don't realize that. You don't slow down for long enough to appreciate it. That's the ultimate lesson, the ultimate wisdom from meditation. So let's conclude here. 6 recommendations to enhance what you've learned today and how to go forward. Spend as much wholesome time alone as possible. Note wholesome. This is time that speaks to your inner introvert. The ability to reflect, the ability to learn. Learn to eat 1 meal per day, or else greatly restrict your eating times and eating choices to more wholesome foods. Start there anyway. Remove any and all intoxicating substances such as drugs or alcohol. Really stress that. If you can get rid of every drug you're taking, it's a very good thing. If you can get rid of all intoxicating substances, your life will be 10 times better, I promise. Avoid music and entertainment for substantial periods of your life. So maybe you like to jam out at home, go for a week or 3 days with only news. And you will find that your mind stops chasing rabbits. It stops running to politics and drama and the lust that is associated therewith. Reduce sexual activity for a time. You can even eliminate it, go for several days or weeks without sexual stimulation, and you find that your meditative clarity improves. Cut down on social media usage for periods of time. Definitely do this. And then be completely honest and true with yourself and others. No covert contracts or unresolved issues. Covert contract is any agreement you make in your head where you feel like you don't have to ask for something, it should just be given to you. And the more you meditate, the more honest you can be in your intentions. Ask yourself, why am I getting online? Why am I looking at this picture? Why am I watching this video? You will find that this changes your perspective if you can just stop and ask that question. Now, the picture there, in conclusion, is the cairn of Barnazes, and that is one of the oldest structures made by humans, and it dates conservatively to 4,850 before the Common Era, and is basically an old, small ruins. Now, this was once a great pyramid, but in only that amount of time, it's been reduced to nothing. Think about the Great Pyramids. They're much younger than the Cairn of Barnazes, but they are still dilapidated, but they're there, but they're heading out. It is estimated that the upper limit of anything in life is about 50,000 years. Nothing can exceed, in any form, can exceed 50,000 years, unless a fossil can keep it, or an environment arises that allows something to be immune from oxidation and upheaval from the earth, then it's not going to last. Well, this is a reflection of us, and this is the reason I put this in this slide. If you're honest about life and everything you do, you are mindful of the wisdom of meditation, which tells you that everything is fleeting and changing and not dependable. Just as with this once mighty pyramid and these ruins, it's not hardly there anymore. And that's it's not even been 10,000 years. And this great structure, which you would think would be permanent, is not. My friends, everything in every spiritual tradition is trying to teach you the same thing. Nothing outside of yourself can be counted on. Nothing outside of yourself can be counted on. It is all fleeting and it is all passing away. The only way to find happiness or stability is to look within. That's the best you have. I hope this has been helpful to you. Please like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you in the next video.